One of the campaign promises by Donald Trump was to label China as a currency manipulator. Now, what does that even mean? Because if you ask most people, what is China doing to manipulate the currency, they don't actually have an answer for you. And in fact, most of the talking heads on television and radio don't even actually explain why China is supposedly a currency manipulator. But here's how it actually works. China is an export-dependent country. It must export to the United States primarily, and to a lesser degree, other countries. The trade relationship between the U.S. and China is obviously, no secret. It's well known that the two economies are very interconnected on this basis. Now, the United States has a free-floating the value of the U.S. currency is free-floating, which means it's not specifically pegged to anything. It's whatever the demand for it is. China buys an extraordinary amount of U.S. debt, which is about $7.2 trillion at this time. When China purchases this debt, it increases the value of the U.S. dollar. And in doing so, it makes its own exports attractive to U.S. businesses and American people, because by doing this, they can actually sell more to the public. I mean, this is just simple economics. China's an export-dependent country, and China buys up a great deal of U.S. debt in order to prop up their ability to be able to export, be affordable to export to the U.S. So you have this idea that somehow China's doing some kind of terrible plot against the U.S. Well, it's really not. They're just propping up their own interests by being able to export. Now, the general idea is, well, if China owns all this debt, then they're going to call it in one day and destroy the U.S. I mean, this act is nonsense and comes from people who, frankly, don't understand how international debt works. If China was to actually do this, it would crash the U.S. dollar overnight. This would crash the Chinese economy as well. In fact, it would crash the entire world. There is no rational reason why China would actually do this, because it would destroy their own economy along with the United States and the rest of the world. It's just not going to happen. There's no reason to do this. However, China does sometimes sell off U.S. debt in order to send a message to the United States. Whenever China and the United States are having a beef over something, China will say, oh, we need a new world's reserve currency. Or they'll sell off a bunch of U.S. debt, deflating the price of the U.S. dollar, which makes it harder for the U.S. to import from other countries. It's just a little game that they both play with each other, being the United States and China, whenever they're having a tiff over something. So does that count as currency manipulation? The deliberate purchase of U.S. treasuries by China to increase the price of the U.S. dollar in order to make it more valuable, and thus China able to export more to it. Does that count as manipulation in your eyes? Well, that would simply be supply and demand in the eyes of a lot of people. I mean, so now that we know that this is how it actually works, is this really a manipulation? I mean, is this like some terrible scheme by China to try to destroy the United States or to destroy its currency? No. In fact, it's just simple economics. But this big scary idea of China manipulating the U.S. is just used as a talking point to justify hostilities against China whenever Chinese and American interests run counter to each other. Just as China talking about replacing the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency is just their way of doing the same thing back. In reality, this is just plain economics, and it's something that's mutually beneficial to both countries. And in fact, this inflated U.S. dollar price, purchasing goods from China rather than manufacturing them domestically, has been what has increased the U.S. standard of living in the last 2 decades or so. Because now all those commodities which would have cost a lot more now cost a lot less, and more people can have them. Thus, the material standard of living has actually increased as a result of that. However, this does hurt some industries, like the U.S. steel industry, for example. Again, this is all just plain basic economics. There's no real terrible conspiracy here. it's just another function of capital accumulation. It's just another function of competition, one that works out as a benefit for both the United States and China. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.